Let's get some questions from the group.
Questions, please.
I have a question.
Dr. Twerski talked before at the very beginning, the whole genesis of the self-esteem process came from those 5 minutes where you felt you couldn't be with yourself, and somebody brought to your attention that you then perhaps didn't have good self-esteem. And I'm not, far be it for me to make a comment about how it affected you personally, but I'm making a leap for myself that certainly in this generation, I think a lot of people have trouble with solitude, with having time to themselves to do nothing, and we create distractions all the time, 100% of our day, and part of that is bad, and part of it is also societal, where the idea of being busy is like a status symbol. You know, you're so busy, and I'm so busy, and I'm more busy than you, and I'm going to sleep till 2 o'clock, and there's this status about being so busy and doing things, that doing nothing is considered lazy, irresponsible, you know, so I'm just wondering if you could speak to that perhaps, you know, we need to learn, yeah, for sure, to be able to sit in a hot tub for a half an hour and be with ourselves, because we don't know how to do that, but I'm not sure, let's say for all of us, it would necessarily mean a lack of self-esteem.
Right. Thank you for the question. I've suggested to people a very simple test. When the house is quiet, sit down in an easy chair, dim the lights, and sit there for 10 minutes, and don't do anything. Don't go to sleep, but sit there for 10 minutes and see how comfortable or uncomfortable you are. Now, that's not a foolproof test, but a lot of people will find, like I did, that they can't tolerate that.
But they may feel guilty, like she said.
I'm sorry?
They may feel guilty. I should be doing something.
Right.
Why are they not tolerating it?
Right. Well, you said that maybe you're not tolerating it because your culture says you got to be doing something all the time,
It's
right?
more important. Never
Right,
happens.
but we'd have to take a look also to consider the possibility that they may be uncomfortable for the same reason I was uncomfortable. It's not was guilt, but I couldn't be with my own company, right? I needed distraction. You know, distraction is the country's greatest industry. It's not the automobile, right? It's the entertainment and distraction. That's what it's all about. And I think that we have to talk to people about, you don't have to distract from yourself. You're okay, right? And learn to be with yourself. So, you're right. Yeah. I think that the culture teaching us that you've got to constantly be a type A personality, doing things and pushing things, right, is a very dangerous thing, right?
This question.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned that today's world, the reason there is self-esteem because everybody judges themselves with the outcome. What is the difference between success and outcome?
What is?
The difference between success and outcome.
What's the difference between success and outcome? Well, the question is how do you judge success, right? It's successful if it has a profit, right? And if I did it with all good intentions and doing everything right and the business failed, right, then that was not a success, right? That's because you're judging success with outcome. And maybe in business you have no other choice. I wouldn't want to invest in a company that doesn't have good outcome. Right? But we have to know that in our personal lives, we have to get off of the outcome business. Right? And certainly when our children, when we let them know that what we expect from them is to do the best they can. Right? And there are such things as grades that the school gives out, and we can't deny that the importance of grades, but your value as a person is not by the grade that you get, but how much effort did you put into this to the study. Right? Is there?
I went and spoke to somebody, and she said self-esteem, there's everything in Yiddishkeit has a Jewish, like a Hebrew word, in the Torah word for it. Self-esteem is so talked about nowadays, but there's no, like, in the Torah, besides for, let's say, besides for that, there's no other place in the Torah that really says the word self-esteem. So then, there's no such thing. They said something as like working on yourself, whatever. But she said, I don't believe in self-esteem because there's no word, there's no concept in the Torah that Hashem says is self-esteem.
Right.
So,
Unfortunately, it was not pointed out earlier, and that's why I pointed out the value of Ali Shul, where Rav Chaim Avara has a whole section on Das Atzmai, right? And he points out that if you don't have Das Atzmai, if you don't know yourself, right, your Avodas Hashem isn't going to go anywhere, right? So at least somebody's pointing it out. Why there is no word in what's in Kodesh for it, I don't know.
it's still something that's actual, it's still real.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, it's important to know that low self-esteem is not anivus. Anivus is a very good midah, right? But anivus is not low self-esteem. And the best example, the Chofetz Chaim. People who knew the Chofetz Chaim, we were fortunate to know people who knew the Chofetz Chaim. He was the most humble person in the world. Right? Now, did the Chofetz Chaim know that he knew everything of the Torah that's knowable? Right? Obviously. Because he wrote the Mishnah Berurah and set himself up as the final authority in halacha. Huh? How could he do that unless he knew that he was absolutely encyclopedic in Kol HaTorah Kula? Right? So he knew what he was, but that did not give him any gaiva. That did not think that he made him superior to someone else. In fact, they tell, I think a beautiful story, that in the generation of the Chofetz Chaim, there were these great Torah scholars, the Rogatchover, and Reb Chaim Ozer, and the Or Sameach, Meir Simcha. The Chofetz Chaim was never put into a league with one of them, right? Even though he was certainly as great as they were. And they say, why? I wasn't ever felt to be in that club. And they say, well, the reason for that was that the Chofetz Chaim, being aware of his enormous encyclopedic knowledge of Torah, right, prayed to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that people should not recognize him as a Goen. And his prayers were answered. But why didn't he also pray that they should not recognize him as a tzaddik? It never occurred to him. It never occurred to him that he would be thought of as the tzaddik. That's the difference between anivus and low self-esteem. Yes, dear.
How would you respond to our adults today, our single adults, who are, how would you respond to our single adults today who have been dating for 10 years or 15 years and are being worn out in the process where their self-esteem is being eroded and their happiness is severely impacted? Because in that situation, there is a real goal. It's not just the process of dating.
How could you respond to the older singles whose self-esteem is worn out from dating 10, 15 years without achieving a real goal?
Yeah, very good question. How would you respond to a single who, after dating 10 or 15 years, is simply worn out and has lost hope and lost faith? All right. First of all, what I would like to do is I'd like to be able to understand what is going on, if I can find out why the dating is not successful. Well, what's the obstacle? Why, if so many experiences with dating, hasn't there been any kind of attraction? Right? And find out, is there something, is it possible sometimes that something is being done that's an obstacle to the attraction? Like the case that I gave you this morning, right? The person who had low self-esteem, and because he felt that he was likable, tried to impress, right? And that just was self-defeating, right? Is there anything like that? Is there any reason why there is distrust, that he distrusts women, she distrusts men? Right? And try to find out at the early stage. I wouldn't wait for 10, 15 years, right? But if after a period of a number of dates in which there seems to be no no interest in going anywhere, I at that point would say, hey, it's time to talk to someone and find out what your feelings are, whether there's anything that's an obstacle to the attractiveness of previous experiences, or something that you may be inadvertently doing. Right? Some of these singles that I know of, I haven't the faintest idea as to what interferes with their attractiveness. They're just wonderful people, and for some reason or other, it's not working. It's a serious problem of self-esteem, because you lose faith in yourself and you lose trust in yourself. Right? And you have to realize, I don't know what I was destined for, but I can't let anything like this be crush me to think less of myself. Right? If I wasn't fortunate enough to make the connection, we don't know why. We had no idea what Hashem has in mind. But not to allow that, it's a very serious test. Right? Yes?
Self-esteem. What's the difference between self-esteem and v'ahavta re'acha kamocha?
What's the difference of self-esteem?
And
V'ahavta kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself, your fellow as yourself. Well, first of all, obviously, v'ahavta re'acha kamocha, if loving as yourself, you have to love yourself first. Right? Because if you've got low self-esteem, right, and you don't have much love for yourself, and you're going to love your neighbor as to how much you don't love yourself, that's not going to go anywhere, right? Again, self-esteem is a healthy feeling, and it's not gaiva, and we should not confuse the two. Right? Yes, sir.
How can we help ourselves and others not compare all the time to each other? To stop comparing ourselves to others.
Listen, you know, one of the things that we ought to do, some of these questions I think are answerable. I have not been trained in group therapy, but I believe that there is an additional advantage to group therapy over and above one-to-one. Right? One-to-one therapy may be very necessary, but it's also very helpful if you get into a group where there's an interchange between 8 or 9 or 10 people. And what happens is that I may have problems in recognizing my own values for whatever reasons. But that doesn't stop me from recognizing somebody else's values. Right? And what happens is that the interchange in the group therapy, that the guidance will come not from the therapist, right, but from peers, right, who say, but you don't see that what you're saying about yourself, about the other person, is what you're saying about yourself. Right? And I believe that group therapy is a method which has been underutilized. Right? I couldn't do it because I never was trained in it. Right? But I believe that those of us who are young enough and are doing therapy ought to look, if we haven't been trained in group therapy, should pick up some skills in group therapy, because I think can be very helpful for self-esteem. Yes, sir.
If someone knows the difference between right and wrong and knows how they're supposed to be living, is there a method that they could use to implement, let's say, some of the things that we learned today and some of the things that they know to be right? Like, for example, if someone knows it's not good to eat a particular cookie because it's not good for their health, is there some method they could use to implement their understanding of what's right and wrong to make their actions go accordingly?
If I had the answer to that, I'd probably have the answer to many eating disorders. You know? I don't know. I was never trained in eating disorders either. And again, I feel that probably the best method for working with eating disorders is with a group support, right? And find out how others are doing it.
Right. Well, not just the eating disorder. The example I just gave was just an example, but maybe just in general, is there a method that you would suggest on how to implement let's say some of the things we learned today into our actions, instead of just like writing it down, how can we take the next step to actually use it to affect our lives?
One of the things, see, I'm very impressed with the kinds of things that have happened with the 12-step program of AA, right? Where the 4th step is doing the inventory, right? Which I think is very important. And the 5th step is then sharing it with someone else. Right? That having had a moral inventory, to do a 5th step with a responsible person and share your feelings and share whatever you're right. And again, these are not things that are done one time, but have to be done several times. And I think that's one way in which a person may get a better handle on the kind of thing you say.
One question back there.
Just in some of the cultures, group therapy is unheard of. What would you recommend to break through this stigma?
Well, the question is, in some of the frum culture, group therapy is unheard of. Look, there's a lot of things that were unheard of in the Orthodox circles that have changed. Right? Therapy as a whole has. It was not that long ago that Rabbi Yankel Kamenetsky said that going to a psychiatrist you have a Gval Yava, right? That you let yourself be killed rather than go to a psychiatrist. And at the time he said that that was right? Because at that time, the Freudian psychiatrists believed that religion was a neurosis. And if a person was religious, he had to be cured. Right? But fortunately, that's changed, and we now have therapists who are Torah observant. And just as we made that breakthrough, then we have to be able to make breakthrough about the groups. It's a little bit more difficult to come because Jews are very secretive people. Right? And we don't want to share our feelings with others. But I know of several psychiatrists who are successfully running groups with frum people. Right? I think it's just a client could be told, look, I think we could get an additional advantage. I'm trying to put together a group now of 6 people, and there may be some resistance at first, but eventually, and it'll catch on just like the other things caught on. Yeah, you know how many people are going to the 12-step programs, whether it's AA, OA, NA, SA, whatever, GA, things that were never heard of before, right? And are sharing their stories and sharing their lives with everybody. Right? So it's something that can be done. Yes, dear.
You said that the low self-esteem is really based on a negative delusion, which can't be changed by a rational argument. So what could you say to a coworker or a relative that has poor self-esteem, and no matter what you say, they still feel bad about it? So what could you say to them?
No, all I would say is, look, I think you're a wonderful person, but I don't think you appreciate yourself. Right? It's a shame to see you suffering from feelings of inadequacy that are unwanted. Why don't you do something to try not? All you can do is suggest it. Whether they buy it or they're not is something else.
Something like therapy?
Right.
You mentioned before with spirituality and clients that you would kind of understand what you're holding, but how do you make it worth it to them? Because it's a lot of work and not a lot of fun. So how do you make spirituality worth it for your client?
How do you make?
You tell the client, look, you came to me because you're discontent, right? I can tell you that one reason for discontent is the lack of fulfillment of all your capabilities. Right? And so many people are unaware of their capabilities and sell themselves short, and they don't know why they're unhappy. They don't know. And I'm telling you that it's possible to happen because you're not fulfilling yourself to the best of your ability. Right? This is what. So there's a way to do it, and guide them to at least read up on self-esteem, right? And maybe consult somebody about self-esteem. Thank you for listening, everyone.
I want to thank Nefesh International. I want to thank everyone for coming from great distances to spend the day with us today.